The Golden Temple in Amritsar, India, is the spiritual home of Sikhism, the youngest of the world's great religions. Each morning, Sikhs gather here to worship and bathe in the sacred waters.
Sikhism started with one man in the 15th century. And today there are 20 million adherents of Sikhism around the world. Clearly there's a dynamic in these people, otherwise they couldn't have survived for 500 years against the most astonishing odds which they faced. Invaders, wars, conflicts, persecution, repression, everything on the book was thrown at them, and yet they came out of it stronger, better, more self-confident.
Orthodox Sikhs are among the most distinctive and recognizable religious groups in the world. But despite this exclusive appearance, Sikhism is founded on firm principles of tolerance and equality.
Sikhism is perhaps one of the most universal of all religions in the world. It does not recognize any distinctions on the basis of caste, creed, color, race. It guarantees gender equality. It recognizes people on the basis of their actions.
But there is another powerful strain in Sikhism, its martial tradition. India's British rulers recognized this, placing Sikhs in the vanguard of the imperial army. A devout Sikh is never parted from their sword. This merging of the spiritual and the militant took place with the creation of the Khalsa, the sacred order of the Sikhs, whose flag with its twin swords flies high over Amritsar. April 1999 marks the 300th anniversary of the first Khalsa initiation, an event which still defines the ideals and identity of Sikhs across the globe. Sikhism first emerged some 500 years ago in an area of northwest India called the Punjab, the land of the 5 rivers. The region had seen turbulent times, with foreign armies passing through as they invaded India. Yet for thousands of years the Punjab has remained largely unchanged, the rural home of a farming people. And it was in a typical farming community that the founder of Sikhism, Guru Nanak, was born in 1469.
Guru Nanak didn't write very much about himself. He lived through the crack-up of one empire, the Lodhis, and the invasion by the Mughals who set up the following empire. He talks of troublous times, but his own life story is still a little incomplete. Guru Nanak's father probably owned a little land. He was able to educate his son modestly in Persian and Sanskrit. He was married off very young, but his mind was not on either business or rearing a family. It was really spiritual pursuits that he was after.
Nanak had been born a Hindu into India's main religious tradition dating back thousands of years. Hinduism emphasized multiple gods, rituals, and a rigid social hierarchy of different castes. But the invaders who now ruled India were Muslims. They believed in a single god and actively sought converts to Islam. Nanak saw good in both religions, but believed they'd become caught up in bad practices. While Martin Luther was busy changing the course of religion in Europe, Nanak brought about a reformation of his own in the Punjab. As a teacher or guru, he attracted plenty of devoted students, or to use the Punjabi word, Sikhs.
Where Guru Nanak scored over other religious teachers of his time was that he spoke in the language of the people, the common people, the peasantry, and the tradespeople.
At the core of Guru Nanak's teachings is a single God who is both universal and personal.
Guru Nanak's concept of God, in fact, is contained in the Sikhs' morning prayer, the Japji. The Japji opens with the phrase Ikumkar. This, in essence, contains Guru Nanak's idea of God and his message to mankind, that there is one sole supreme being. He is the creator of the universe. He is omnipresent. He is immanent. He is without fear, without rancor. He is formless. And in fact, according to Guru Nanak, God resides within each one of us.
Guru Nanak's belief that God could be reached directly and simply was reflected in his love of musical worship.
Guru Nanak was essentially a poet. He wrote some extremely beautiful poetry, not only religious in praise of God, but even description of nature. And he set all his hymns to classical ragas of the Indian music. So there's a great deal of emphasis on music as an approach to God.
But Guru Nanak didn't see the religious life as just being about inward-looking contemplation. His teachings had a strong practical basis. Sikhism was about living in the real world, with its commitment to social and religious equality.
Guru Nanak's thinking was extraordinarily ahead of his times. 500 years ahead of what we are talking about today, for instance, in terms of interfaith solidarity or understanding, or social issues like gender equality and so on. He was well ahead of his time in the sense that he felt, and the two gurus who succeeded him, that women should have completely equal rights with men. And to give it specific form to this idea, this concept of equal rights, the widows were allowed to remarry, which was unheard of. Women priests were ordained. The wearing of the veil was stopped.
The Sikh ideal of equality is most clearly demonstrated in the langar, the free kitchen, attached to each Sikh temple or gurdwara. The biggest langar is at the Golden Temple, where thousands of free meals are served every hour to anyone who comes, regardless of their background or beliefs.
Different people sat together and cooked for each other and ate together. Now this had to do again with doing away with the pernicious caste distinctions, that an upper caste can't be ever seen, perish the thought, sitting with a lower caste and eating, leave alone even getting touched by him and so on. You don't withdraw from the daily life, but still your concerns should be rooted in an ethical framework.
After a life spent teaching and travelling throughout India and the East, Guru Nanak died in 1539, having appointed a successor to carry on his work. Guru Angad was the second of a series of gurus. He was followed by Guru Amar Das, who founded the site which eventually became the Golden Temple. The fourth Guru, Ram Das, developed the site, but it was the fifth Guru, Arjan, who built the first temple in 1588. But Arjan's guruship also saw another key event in the history of Sikhism, as he came into conflict with India's Muslim emperor Jahangir.
It is when the Sikh church spread, or temples were built all around the countryside, and wealth started accumulating, that the Sikh Guru became, apart from a teacher, a rich person, a personage in his own rights. And that begins with the fifth Guru, Guru Arjan. And the emperor realized that he'd become too powerful. He was arrested, taken to Lahore, tortured and martyred. And from then on, the conflict never ceased.
The Sikhs now took up arms under Arjan's son and successor Guru Har Gobind. The seventh Guru, Har Rai, and the eighth, the child Guru, Har Krishan, presided over more peaceful times. But in 1675, the ninth Guru, Tegh Bahadur, again incurred the wrath of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb by defending Hindu religious rights. His subsequent execution had a lasting impact.
Martyrdom has a special place in the Sikh psyche. It was the fifth Guru, then the ninth Guru, Tegh Bahadur, who were both executed by the rulers. Thereafter, there's a whole line of martyrs. To die for the faith is to die a noble death. And I think that has continued right from the time of the Gurus to the present.
The transformation of Sikhism would be completed under the last man to carry the title of Guru, and who would have the greatest influence on Sikhism since it was founded, Guru Gobind Singh. The Sikhs had been honing their military skills ever since Guru Arjan's death, but they'd become caught up in a web of regional politics. The community was threatened from the outside and collapsing from the inside. It was vital that Guru Gobind took decisive action.
Guru Gobind Singh felt that Sikhism had to be given a distinct identity. Sikhism, according to him, became a religion of pious householders, and he felt that if a kind of self-esteem was regenerated into the people, certain martial qualities were infused into them, they would be able to protect their rights better.
Guru Gobind gathered the Sikhs at his stronghold of Anandpur in the spring of 1699 on Vaisakhi, the first day of the Indian New Year. In what Sikhs celebrate as the most important event in their history since their religion was founded, Guru Gobind initiated his followers into a new sacred order, the Pure or the Khalsa.
He summoned his followers. He sent orders that they should come with their hair and beards uncut. And then he had a big cauldron with water. And he churned it with a double-edged dagger.
Guru Gobind then tested his followers to find out which were the bravest.
He said, I want 5 heads, people who are willing to lay down their heads. 5 people came up, one after another. They came from different castes, from different parts of India. And he baptized them as the Khalsa.
All Orthodox Sikhs aspired to be initiated into the Khalsa. 5 priests representing the original 5 members of the Khalsa prepare the sweetened baptismal water Amrit. As a sign of unity and equality, all male initiates adopt the surname Singh, meaning lion, and all women the name Kaur or princess. On baptism with the Amrit water, they vow to follow a strict moral code and way of life.
The creation of the Khalsa honed and perfected the Sikh identity. Now the idea of the Khalsa's creation was that you stand out in a crowd and you don't go around hiding behind bushes. You say, this is who I am. I'm a Khalsa, I'm a Sikh. Come and get me if you want to. But I will not hide. I'll stand for my convictions. Now that had a profound impact on the psyche of the Sikhs, till today.
Khalsa initiates also adopt visible symbols known as the 5 Ks. Kach, cotton shorts. Kis, uncut hair, symbolizing acceptance of God's gifts. which is kept tidy by a kanga or comb, representing discipline. Men usually cover their hair with a turban. The kara is a steel bracelet which symbolizes unity. And finally, the karban is a small sword representing justice and spiritual power. Guru Gobind Singh's aim was no less than to transform the Sikhs into a community of warrior saints.
Guru Gobind Singh explains it himself in some of his writing, very moving verses he composed. When all other means have failed, it is righteous to draw the sword. He is fighting against tyranny, and he said, I will uproot tyranny from this soil so that righteous people can live. And he fired his people. He said, I'll teach the sparrow to fight the hawk. I'll teach one man to fight 1,000,000. And the Khalsa became a kind of the Sikh samurai, a warrior people.
The Sikhs rallied following the creation of the Khalsa, but only at a great cost. All 4 of Guru Gobind Singh's sons were killed, 2 in battle, and the younger 2 were executed after they refused to convert to Islam. Gobind Singh himself died after being stabbed in 1708. But rather than appointing another guru to follow him, he vested the role in the Sikhs' holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib.
He dramatically and radically changed the whole concept of leadership. This time it is a book of knowledge that will provide what the Sikh community wanted. Well, the Guru Granth Sahib is very, very definitely more than a book. It is a constant source of guidance in moments of sorrow or rejoicing, in moments of tragedy or triumph.
The Granth lies in the Harminder Sahib, the golden temple of Amritsar. Despite its ornate exterior, the temple was carefully designed to reflect the principles of Sikhism.
The concept of Sikhism comes across most beautifully and subtly in the planning of the Golden Temple. For instance, normally the temples were built on a very high plinth, so you were kind of going up, you had to go up to God. Now here it was supposed to be with that the lowest of the creatures could come to the house of God. So you have the Golden Temple, which has been built at a level which is lower than the level of the city outside. The other thing is also the concept of humility, that it is fire that goes upwards, but it is water that goes downwards, a concept that you see in the planning of the Golden Temple.
As the affluence of the Sikhs increased, the temple became more lavish, culminating in a lining of marble and gold. This was during the reign of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, itself a golden age for the Sikhs. Ranjit Singh reunited the Sikhs in an empire stretching beyond the Punjab and across northwest India.
After Guru Gobind Singh, there was 80 years of absolute turmoil, and then Maharaja Ranjit Singh emerged in the late 18th century and consolidated this entire region. Now, this was a period where there was stability, there was political stability in the region. The man had the most phenomenal vision. So it was during this period, 50 years of his reign, that architecture, art, and crafts developed under his patronage. It was very important to have a patron.
Ranjit Singh gave the Sikhs their strongest leadership since the days of the Gurus, but when he died, they fell apart. The British, who had conquered much of India, now saw a chance to add the Punjab to their empire. But the Sikhs wouldn't let it go easily. They met the British with ferocious resistance before finally being defeated in 1849. But far from being a disaster for the Sikhs, the arrival of the British would mark a new era. One of the most spectacular monuments to British rule is India Gate in New Delhi, a memorial to the fallen of the Imperial Indian Army. Sikh names dominate the walls. The British had been so impressed by the Sikhs' fighting skills that they recruited large numbers of them as soldiers. By showing a strong respect for Sikh traditions, the British encouraged the Sikhs to think of themselves as a privileged martial race.
They realized that the strength of the Sikhs as a soldier lay in their identity as a separate community. So whenever battalions were raised or formed, great stress was laid on the Sikh traditions, religious traditions, and the background from which a particular soldier came from. And the British officer in the Sikh army made it a point himself to become like his men. He started wearing a kada. When he went to a ceremonial parade, he wore the Sikh turban. On the ceremonial parade, he wore the chakra on his turban. If a Sikh soldier was found either clipping his beard or cutting his hair, he was immediately court-martialed and dismissed from service.
Sikhs went on to fight and die for the British on battlegrounds from India's northwest frontier to the Flanders fields of World War I. Khalsa Sikhs were also given privileges in other areas of British rule, such as government. Far from diluting Sikh culture, the presence of the British had strengthened it. But the Sikhs were soon reminded of the harsher side to British rule. In 1919, just months after the war ended, hundreds of them were massacred at Jallianwala Bagh, a garden near the Golden Temple, where they'd been taking part in a peaceful demonstration against British rule. Sikhs now stepped forward in their thousands to join the growing movement for Indian independence.
The British government, when they came over there, they were out and out looting our people. I belong to a peasant family. We were under heavy debts because we cannot pay the land revenue. And paying the land revenue, we had to borrow money from the moneylender. And moneylending class was snatching our land. Freedom is the birthright of every person. So my country wanted to be free. And my parents, my grandparents, they were fighting for the freedom of this country. I learned from them and joined.
The Sikh contribution to the Indian independence movement was more than significant, considering their the percentages of population. I mean, they were less than 2% of the population. And yet, 85% of those who were killed or hung by the British during the independence struggle, 85% were Sikhs. Now, why did the Sikhs contribute so much? Because it is rooted in their tradition of valor, the concept of martyrdom, resistance to tyranny. So it springs from that.
The British cracked down mercilessly on the independence movement.
They sentenced me for a year and sent me to the Ludhiana jail. I was kept in a small cell over there, 6 by 8 and 10 feet high. There I had to make all my call of natures inside that little room. And the season was that dump in June, July. So I got jaundice in the cell.
Despite such harsh treatment from the British, when World War II broke out, the Sikhs and their fellow Indians provided the Allies with the largest volunteer army ever recruited.
I had taken an oath of allegiance to defend the country. I went wherever my regiment was ordered to go. And frankly, I don't see any conflict of interest between the two. British had promised us Dominion status at the end of the war, and that word was good enough as far as I was concerned. The Japanese and the Germans had been promising the same thing to us, but we did not know them. The Germans and the Japanese had a very bad track record as colonial powers. And what was there to say? That they may say, now you need another 200 years of civilization before we give you any independence.
By 1946, the British had bowed to the inevitable and were preparing to leave India. The Congress Party of Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi jostled with the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to decide just what shape a free India would take. But in the meantime, India's 6 million Sikhs found themselves politically marginalized.
In the run-up to independence in 1947, the Sikhs expected that as a sword arm of India, as people whose loyalty and whose integrity and whose contribution to India's independence struggle, they expected that their interests would be safeguarded. Well, their interests were not safeguarded. In the negotiations that led up to independence, the Congress Party, the Muslim League and the British negotiated a plan which completely sacrificed the Sikhs.
Once again, at a crucial point in their history, the Sikhs lacked strong leadership. Master Tara Singh, their foremost spokesman, was stronger on rhetoric than he was on politics. He was outmaneuvered by Jinnah, who wanted a separate homeland for Muslims, and by Nehru, who wanted a united India under the leadership of the Congress Party.
Sometimes integrity by itself is not enough. You've got to have the savvy, you've got to have shrewdness, and to some extent you've got to be a political crook, but in the best sense of the term, to see through the working of other crooks. But he was unable to do that.
The deal brokered by the British Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, was a disaster for the Sikhs. A Muslim homeland called Pakistan would come into being, but to provide territory for the new nation, the Punjab would be split down the middle, with the western half going to Pakistan. Jinnah promised the Sikhs a safe home, but those who'd been living in West Punjab had good reasons to be skeptical.
I was living in Lahore. I had no intention of leaving. I thought after the troubles were over, I'd be able to come back. But by May 1947, Lahore was in flames. I saw large parts of the city set alight by Muslim mobs. Every day, a dozen or 2 dozen Sikhs were murdered because they could be spotted very easily. There was not much resistance because the police were largely Muslim and hostile. I left Lahore in August, just before independence, because there was absolutely no choice. All Hindus and Sikhs living around me had gone.
As partition approached in August 1947, Sikhs headed east, fleeing from the Muslim-dominated West Punjab. In return, Muslims from the east headed west. The Punjab's different religious communities now turned on each other in a frenzy of bloodshed and carnage.
I really can't figure out how this barbarity came up. I think a lot of it was misinformation. While rumors were being exaggerated, if a train arrived in Amritsar with 50 killed, the rest of India was told that the whole train had arrived with not one man alive. And perhaps the same thing was being repeated on the other side. But the worst in the human nature came out in both the countries at that time.
The refugees displaced by partition made up the largest migration the world had ever seen. The death toll has been estimated at more than 1 million. A divided Punjab left historic Sikh sites such as Guru Nanak's birthplace in Pakistan.
Think of a man who fought for the freedom of a whole country, for whole people. When the partition comes up, what happened to him? You can imagine. That was the most emotional, that was the most dreadful time for me.
As India celebrated its independence, the Sikhs reflected on the heavy price they'd paid. But if they believed that their lives could become settled once the trauma of partition was over, they would be proved sadly wrong. At first, the future looked good. The hard work of Sikh farmers turned Indian Punjab into the most prosperous state in the country. But by the 1970s, many Sikhs felt that their success hadn't been rewarded with political and economic rights. The Punjab even had to share its capital, Chandigarh, with a neighbouring state. Sikh politicians demanded greater autonomy. Some agitated for an entirely separate Sikh homeland, a land for the Khalsa or Khalistan. India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi resented Sikh leaders for their opposition during the state of emergency she had declared in 1975. Mrs. Gandhi and her Congress party were determined to find a way of dividing Sikh politicians in the Punjab.
Now, the idea was to produce a Sikh leader unbeknown to him and to project him as an extreme militant who, it appeared, or it should appear, was articulating the concerns of all Sikhs.
Around this time, a Sikh revivalist movement led by a charismatic preacher called Janal Singh Bhindranwale swept the Punjab.
Part of the reason for Bhindranwale's rise can be traced back to the prosperity that came to the Punjab. Young Sikhs started drinking, taking opium, trimming their beards, and generally drifting away from the Spartan traditions of the Khalsa. And he went round initially preaching in villages. Turned back to the days of Guru Gobind Singh, be good Khalsa, don't trim your beards, don't smoke, don't drink. And he was successful as a preacher. A large number of Sikhs were rebaptized as Khalsa.
To his admirers, Bhindranwale was just the kind of leader the Sikhs had been looking for.
Sant Jarnail Singh ਦੀ personality ਬਹੁਤ ਖਿੱਚ ਪਾਉਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਿੱਖ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਬਿਰਤੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਿਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬਾਨ ਨੇ ਸਿਰਜਿਆ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਸੰਤ ਸਿਪਾਹੀ ਆਖਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਬਈ ਉਹ ਸੰਤ ਵੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਸਿਪਾਹੀ ਵੀ ਹੋਵੇ.
Bhindranwale took the soldier aspect particularly seriously.
The timing of the assault on the Golden Temple was, in one word, diabolical. Now, don't forget that Punjab at this stage was saturated with intelligence agencies and their agents and moles. Are we expected to believe that they completely overlooked the fact that it's the birth anniversary of the founder of the Golden Temple, Guru Arjan Dev, and timed the assault at that time, when pilgrims are coming from all over the world to be there on that hallowed occasion?
Inside the complex was Surinder Kaur Nanda, the wife of the Golden Temple's information officer.
We had no idea that the army would attack the Golden Temple, because everybody comes to Golden Temple to say their prayers and to bow their heads before the Guru Granth Sahib.
A media blackout was imposed as the army readied itself for what it codenamed Operation Blue Star. Visitors to the Golden Temple expect to hear the sound of fireworks during festivals. But this time, a different kind of explosion echoed through the skies over Amritsar.
We heard noises of bombardment at Akal Takht, noises of people dying. They were crying with pain. And we heard noises of shoes of army men entered in the Golden Temple. They entered the Golden Temple along with their shoes. They didn't care for any respect regard, or anything.
Official figures for the fatalities were 83 soldiers and 492 militants and civilians, including 30 women and 5 children. Unofficial estimates went into the thousands.
When we came out, we saw lying dead bodies here and there. A bad smell was coming out. I was feeling very sad. Our people had attacked Indian people. Yes, our government had attacked Indians.
ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਭੁਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਲੋਕਰਾਜੀ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੋਵੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਬਾਉਣ ਲਈ 9 ਡਿਵੀਜ਼ਨ ਫੌਜ ਚੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਉਹ ਛੋਟੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਕੰਪਲੈਕਸ ਤੇ ਇਦੋਂ ਵੱਡਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਕੋਈ ਸਦਮਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਬਹੁਤ ਦੁੱਖ ਹੈ।
The impact of Operation Blue Star was felt across the world as Sikh communities outside of India erupted in outrage at the news.
When Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated, somebody rang me up to tell me what had happened. At that time, I wasn't sure who'd killed her, but soon after, by the afternoon, one learned that it was her own security guards who were both Sikhs. It was at night that mobs started coming round, all on trucks with cans of oil, petrol, matches, iron rods. There were cab ranks. They were all mainly run by Sikhs. They burnt up their taxi, and I watched the mob come, burn up Sikh shops. There were armed policemen standing by, doing nothing. It was a greater shock for me, because I felt really that this is what a Jew in Nazi Germany must have felt, that I, an Indian, became a refugee in my own country.
Some of the worst violence took place in Trilokpuri, a suburb of Delhi where Sikhs and Hindus lived in close quarters.
Hindustani ਕਹਿਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੁਣ ਸਰਦਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਛੱਡਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ।
ਉਹਨੂੰ ਖਿੱਚ ਕੇ ਲਿਆਏ ਅੰਦਰੋਂ, ਫਿਰ ਅੰਦਰੋਂ ਖਿੱਚ ਕੇ ਤੋਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਡੰਡਾ ਮਾਰਿਆ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਜਿੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਲਾਇਆ ਸੀ। ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰੀ ਕੁੜੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਸੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਗੋਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ, ਤਾਂ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਦਮੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਚਾਉਣ ਗਈ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਖਿੱਚ ਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸੁੱਟ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਤੂੰ ਬਈ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਬਈ ਹਟੋ, ਤੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਕੁੜੀ ਵੀ ਉੱਠ ਚੁੱਕ ਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਥੱਲੇ ਸੁੱਟ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਸੀ। ਫਿਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਉਹਨੇ ਜਿੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਛਾੜ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ, ਤੇ 18 ਜੋ ਛੋਟਾ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਸੀ 10-12 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਮਾਰਿਆ। 6-7 ਲਾਸ਼ਾਂ ਇਕੱਠੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾੜ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
ਜ਼ਬਰਦਸਤੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ, ਉੱਤੇ ਬੁਲਾ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਧੱਕਾ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਉੱਤੋਂ ਸੁੱਟ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਉੱਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਦਾ ਤੇਲ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਸਰੀਏ ਆਪਣੇ ਤਲਵਾਰਾਂ ਨਲਕੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਹੱਥੀਆਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਮਾਰਨ ਡਾ ਪਏ। ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਚੱਲਿਆ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਸੰਗੀ। ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਚੱਲਿਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਦਾ ਤੇਲ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਲਾਤਾ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਤੀਲੀ ਲਗਾਈ ਹੈ, ਤਰਲੇ ਲੈਣ ਡਾ ਪਏ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਓਏ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਦਿਓ, ਮੇਰਾ ਬੱਚਾ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਆ, ਪਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਦਿਓ। ਬਹੁਤ ਤਰਲੇ ਲਏ।
The Congress party is entirely and completely responsible for what happened in Delhi after Mrs. Gandhi's assassination. The killings, the burnings, the lootings, the rape, that is entirely due to the Congress party. They controlled the federal government in the center, and they controlled the Delhi administration. Everything was under them. It could have been stopped in one day.
By the time of Mrs. Gandhi's funeral, most of the violence had subsided, but senior members of her Congress party were accused not merely of negligence but of actual complicity in the killings.
What was very clear was that there was a certain sort of methodology in the way the mobs moved. It was not a random. If Sikh houses were singled out, they had already been listed And those lists you could get from the municipal corporation. Which properties where, who's paying how much tax, what number on what street, who's living.
15 years on, many of the widows and orphans from Trilokpuri have been resettled on the other side of Delhi. Official figures put the number killed in the Delhi riots at 2,733, yet only around 150 people have been convicted for the violence. Cases are still ongoing against dozens of prominent Congress party members.
जिन्हां नूं साडे आदमी नूं मारिया सी उन्हां नाल हाले तक तो कुछ होया ही नहीं ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਬਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਆਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਬਈ ਹਾਂ ਬਈ ਅਸੀਂ ਡੇਟ ਦੇ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਸਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਦਮੀ ਚਲੇ ਗਏ ਤੇ ਕੋਰਟ ਜਾ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨ ਹੋ ਗਏ
The tragic repercussions of Operation Blue Star weren't just limited to India, but it would be the Canadian Sikhs who paid the highest price. The community in Vancouver, British Columbia, is one of the oldest in the West, dating back nearly 100 years. Its history has always been closely interwoven with that of the Sikhs back in India. Even before Indian independence, Vancouver Sikhs had been fighting both for their own rights and those of their fellow Sikhs in India.
People from Indian origin were not allowed to vote in British Columbia, and therefore we were not allowed to practice at the bar. We couldn't go into any profession, and it made it very difficult. We formed an East Indian Youth Association, which took a great deal of participation and pride in the fact that we were working for the freedom of India and for our rights in the franchise here in British Columbia.
Canadian Sikhs who had triumphed over racial and economic barriers committed both their money and their families to the Indian independence movement.
Well, mother and father both had made up their minds that if they had any children, they were going to be doctors. They were going to go back to India and serve in the villages, in their village. And the other thing was that they were going to go into the freedom movement and help to free India. And we were brought up with that. There was no question in our minds that that's what we were going to do.
The campaigning paid off. Less than a month after India's independence, Indians living in British Columbia won the right to vote. Canada has since become a popular destination for Sikh migrants, especially after immigration policies were liberalized during the 1960s.
No other children.
Attitudes within the community have also changed. Just how vocal Canadian Sikhs could be was clear following the raid on the Golden Temple.
We were in the Gurdwara when we got this news that the Golden Temple has been attacked by the Indian government, and there was a lot of people inside the Gurdwara, and all the congregation was stunned to learn this news, and everybody was in shock. We were trying to organize the Sikh community to do something to lessen their griefs.
The attack on the Golden Temple spurred demands for a separate Sikh homeland or Khalistan. The government responded by plunging a massive security force into Punjab. The authorities earned a notorious reputation for human rights violations. Ordinary Sikhs now feared both criminals and the police.
During those years, we got to know firsthand what it must be like to live in a police state. And as you went along the roads, there was police everywhere, and they were pointing guns, pointing at you as you were going along. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if it just went off accidentally. It was horrible, and it was scary.
Although recent years have seen peace return to the Punjab, it may be too soon to judge whether the conflict is over for good.
I don't know of any instance in history or more recent times where police brutality brings about solves or resolves political issues. It hasn't worked in Punjab, therefore. There's no way that we can assume that Punjab is now completely at peace, because below the surface, the same resentments simmer. Many of the grievances are unaddressed. Those who have lost their lives through police measures and police brutality, their families and others are now added to those who already had grievances.
Many Sikhs abroad hope that democratic means can now be used to influence events in India. The Canadian Parliament already has 3 Sikh MPs, and 1997 saw the appointment of the first Sikh cabinet minister, Harbans Singh Dhaliwal.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
I've articulated to all the governments in India about human rights and how important it is, particularly if you look at the Delhi riots in India. I said those people should be brought to justice. They were responsible for the Delhi riots. In terms of the extrajudicial killing in the Punjab, I've spoken up as a member of Parliament saying that human rights is very important. I strongly believe that economic prosperity is linked to human rights.
In Amritsar, preparations are nearly complete to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the Khalsa. The Khalsa was created to ensure the community's survival through difficult and dangerous times. Yet the last 15 years have seen some of the gravest crises Sikhism has had to face.
Sikhism has always emerged very fine and strong whenever there has been a challenge, either from within or from without. And I'm sure that they will be able to put behind them the events of the 1980s and emerge finer and stronger.
Many Sikhs feel the time has come to once again revitalize their community. For the 2 million Sikhs who live away from the spiritual homeland of Punjab in India, maintaining a Sikh identity on foreign shores has its own challenges.
I see a lot of confusion about a generation gap between parents and children, you know, the people, the potential Sikhs for tomorrow.
You do start questioning, you know, what are you about? You know, why do I look different? Why are people asking me questions and I don't know the answers to them?
I have been a Sikh all of my life. I just didn't realize that there was actually a religion or a word for it.
An English churchyard is the unlikely resting place for Britain's first known Sikh settler, the son of the last great ruler of Punjab.
The story of the life of Maharaja Dalip Singh is ultimately and sadly a tragic one. Maharaja Dalip Singh ended up coming to England as a result of the British annexation of his kingdom of Punjab, and he came here at an age of 15 years. He was, after all, the last ruler of the Sikhs and the son of the legendary and powerful Maharaja Ranjit Singh. The British, at a time of great imbalance in Punjab and in India generally, did not want the Sikhs to become a focus for opposition to the British rule, and it was in their interest to keep Ranjit Singh's son away from Punjab.
Dalip Singh lived in comfortable exile on the Elvedon estate in Suffolk. His distance from India further emphasized by his adoption of Christianity.
It's clear that he was veered very strongly towards Christianity by the British administration, so that he would lose contact with his own community and that he would live the life of an Englishman. Later in his life, as he realized what had been taken from him, he took a great interest in his faith, and all records show that prior to his death, he re-embraced Sikhism.
Dalip Singh's image has been adopted by British Sikhs as a potent symbol of their own identity.
He was, by all accounts, the first Sikh settler in this country. But it's what he symbolizes beyond that. He symbolizes a link between Punjab and Britain. So for generations of Sikhs in Britain, he can assume a very important role.
Unlike Duleep Singh, most of today's 500,000 Sikhs are in the country by choice, but their history has still not been an easy one. Sikhs first began coming to Britain in significant numbers in the 1950s, when news of a labour shortage following the Second World War reached the villages of Punjab. They were joined in the early 70s by Sikhs who had fled East Africa because of political instability.
They came here for all the tough jobs, like working in foundries, in factories, in mills. It was hard. They came mainly singly, and then they began to settle.
I came to England in 1962 because we heard a lot of good stories about England, that it is a land of opportunity and it is a land of future. When I reached here in England, I was wearing turban, but my colleagues and my uncle, first thing they told me that, look, you have to cut your hair down and you have to take your turban off, otherwise you won't get work.
With the majority of the community, the native community in this country, the turban was something that they considered superfluous. Why should people look different? That was the general attitude. So we had these arguments that why should the Sikhs want to wear a turban if they were bus drivers or bus conductors? Why should Sikh children want to wear a turban instead of the school uniform?
Tarsum Singh Sandhu worked in a factory before finding a job on the buses in 1966. It was then he decided to return to his beard and turban.
I thought, whatever happened, I want to be what I am. I want to be what my identity is. And it is part of my religion. I must wear it.
But his managers suspended him, saying that his turban wasn't a part of his uniform and he could only return to work if he removed it.
There was a lot of uproar in the Asian community. They organized demonstrations in Wolverhampton, in London at different times. It was taken to first to local authority, then to MPs, then to House of Parliament. After 2 years, it was allowed that Sikhs can wear turban on the buses.
Britain is now home to the largest community of Sikhs outside India.
What's stopping young Sikhs going to the Gurdwara is basically, many of them cannot speak Punjabi. And if they do, it's not a level of what they speak at home. You know, they go there and they see this guy with a big beard and white clothes, and he's really not on their sort of wavelength.
Shira Kaur was baptised into Sikhism at an Amrit ceremony 2 years ago.
Before I took Amrit, I was a rebellious teenager. I drank and went through all kinds of phases in life. By taking Amrit, what I've achieved is a purpose to life where I know that all my actions have a meaning. When I look around me and see young people who are Asians, and I see a lot of Punjabis, unfortunately, not only, you know, 1 in a couple of thousand you actually see a Sikh. You know, that quality, that spirit inside people, unfortunately, is declining. What worries me about the Sikh youth in the future is that, unfortunately, you see miles by miles longer queues at going to a gig than you would people queuing to go inside and pay their respects at Sikh temple.
A common passion shared by most young Sikhs, whether orthodox or not, is Bhangra, pop music based on Punjabi folk rhythms.
Me and my friends enjoy going to Bhangra gigs because being Sikh, we have an identity to be there. We have like a place. Being Punjabi, you can understand the lyrics and you understand the sound, the drums. You feel there's a tradition and culture there which is just you don't see in every club, and that's why I go to Bhangra gigs.
The problem we have is that youngsters think that the Punjabi way of life and the Sikh way of life are more or less the same thing, where they're not. There's a clear distinction and a line to be drawn between the two.
The qualities of the Khalsa, which represent purity,
Those trying to keep young British Sikhs within the faith have made it their main strategy to catch them while they're young.
The 10th prophet of the Sikhs, Guru Gobind Raji, called everyone...
From my own experience, I think there is a real need to actually at least make an attempt to present Sikhism to a younger audience so that they can make a choice. I'm involved in workshops that go on up and down the country, which are all done on a voluntary basis to try to educate young Sikhs who may not have the teaching or the environment at home to actually give them the fullest understanding of Sikhism.
Quick.
What we need to do as young Sikhs that are active on the ground today is really represent all of the whole panorama of Sikh beliefs, Sikh religious beliefs, Sikh culture, Sikh heritage and Sikh history. And we need to present that in a medium and in vehicles that are well understood by Sikhs that are growing up in this country today.
Many young Sikhs aren't actually aware of the remarkable heritage that they belong to. Family and myself, we tend to frequent all the antique arcades and places such as Portobello Market, Camden Market up in London, really searching for anything of interest to Sikhs.
Have a look down there. There's some nice pieces. There's a couple of customers looking at the moment. But
A lot of British officers and a lot of British serving men would come back to England with things brought back from the Punjab and from other parts of India.
These are really modern maps. We're not going to get into these. This one's interesting.
What's this? Indian troops ordered for service in Europe, Ninth Bengal Cavalry.
I never knew about what it meant to be Sikh until I think about I hit university. And that's when you do start questioning, you know, what are you about? You know, why do I look different? Why are people asking me questions and I don't know the answers to them? And so it's really then that I started to find out more and more about what the Sikh religion's about, what our heritage is, what the values are, and the history, etc. There's a later edition by the British.
Amandeep's interest in Sikh history has led him to become involved in a prestigious exhibition of Sikh arts at London's Victoria and Albert Museum.
English calibration.
30 years ago, we've never dreamt of having a very British institution, a very imperial institution such as the V&A, celebrating with us the 300th anniversary of the birth of the Khalsa. So I think what we're seeing now is very much Sikhs in the ascendancy in this country.
Or at a certain point, at certain ranges, he would have to...
I think Sikhs of my generation should really try to address the issues that are facing young Sikhs in Britain today. For example, the idea of getting a job in the city as a professional. Many Sikhs think that they can't get into the city, but that's obviously not true because there are many people like myself who have made it into the city and are doing, doing relatively well for themselves. Okay. If you see Rob, Louise or Mark, can you just let them know that I'm in the canteen waiting for them for the meeting? Yeah. Thanks. I'm currently training to be a chartered accountant. Frequently, you walk in and you're introduced to the clients for the first time by the managers on the job. And sometimes you get the look of, oh my God, what's this? Which is quite, I'm used to it, so it's not really a problem for me to deal with. But it's just interesting to see the reaction on people's faces. And then you get the moments when the ice breaks and they come out with that question which they're holding up inside for 2 or 3 weeks, and they finally muster up the courage to say, so what's the turban about? What is the beard about? And then you can have quite a good conversation, drop a few points and so on. And it opens up a whole new avenue and a whole new understanding, so next time they meet a Sikh, they can say, oh, I know this about Sikhs.
But the exposure of Westerners to Sikhs has also produced one of the most unexpected events in Sikhism in recent years, a movement of white Sikh converts based in the United States.
Inhale, hold the breath and slowly bring your hands overhead till the thumb tips meet. Exhale and set yourself down for victory pose. Arms straight out for balance. Legs up at an angle and your body in a V. Look straight ahead this time. Focus on your big toe as you rapid fire powerfully. Rapidly.
The first thing that really drew me to Sikhism was the idea that God is within, not without. I'd always kind of pictured God from my mother and other influences as this great white-haired man sitting on top of a cloud just waiting for me to come up at the end of my life. And I'd never had that personal experience, but I'd also always felt, even as a small child, that it was more of what was inside of me that was more important. Sikhism was one of the first religions that I found that really believed as I did, that God is within me and it's within everyone around me, and to recognize that in everyone and not be judgmental in that.
Once plain Jeffrey Scott Anderson, Jay Qatar began his spiritual search as a U.S. Army sergeant during the Panama invasion.
I had bullets flying by my head and kind of dodging cars and trying to enter buildings and things like that, and people getting shot, and it suddenly made me realize that I could actually die. I'm only 23 years old, but I could actually die. And so I started really, after that experience, trying to find out what it was that I believed in. What happens when I die? You know, where do I go from here, and how does that affect how I live now?
Jay Qatar was introduced to Sikhism through the Healthy, Happy, Holy organization, or 3HO, founded in America in the late 60s by Harbhajan Singh Khalsa, also known to his followers as Yogi Bhajan.
The core principle of this teaching is to give people experience and deep understanding which they can feel that there is a higher life, higher self, and higher excellence in them. We can't say this is right or this is wrong. All we are saying, all is right where you can get the experience. And if we can provide them practical living experience, my tradition tells me and commands me to one thing: let no person go spiritually hungry. And if he's a Christian, God bless him. If he's a Jew, God bless him. And if he's a Hindu, God bless him. If he's a Sikh, God bless him.
My parents reacted to me converting to Sikhism actually with a lot of grace. My mother has always been very supportive of who I am, but she's also always had a very big fear of cults growing up. And so her first question to me was, after a long period of silence, was, will they let you out when you want to get out? And I was like, yes, Mom, I'm not being held against my will here, and I'm not being brainwashed. And she started asking me questions. Well, what do you believe? How do you believe about God? And it's like, well, I believe this and this. And she's like, well, I believe that. And so why do you wear a turban? Well, I do it for this reason. Well, I believe in that. So she started seeing the similarities between how she thought. And I really told her, I said, Mom, without even knowing about it, you've raised me to be a Sikh all my life. And the truth is, as a good friend of mine put very well, that I have been a Sikh all of my life. I just didn't realize that there was actually a religion or a word for it.
Jay Qatar now runs a security firm in New Mexico, along with other Sikh converts.
And what you may find out is that they think they're worried about somebody breaking into their place, but what their real liability is their computer security.
If we're packaging that,
99% of the time, I get an incredible positive reaction from people. All of a sudden they realize that I'm not here to convert them into Sikhism, and I'm a normal person. They start asking questions if they've never heard about Sikhism before, or I had a Sikh friend back in college, as a matter of fact. And so to me, it's a bridge for people to really escape from their comfort zone and expand their horizons and start to look at more of their environment around them.
The security firm is one of several businesses and welfare projects run by the Sikhs from their main community in Espanola, New Mexico, founded by Yogi Bhajan in 1970.
I went all over the world. I feel God lives everywhere, but his postmaster address is Espanola. The weather, the height of this place, the people, and it is just like our Punjab, here you do not feel that you live out of Punjab. It's just a village of Punjab.
What I found in the community here in Espanola were more of the tools and the support systems that I really felt were beneficial for me on my path. The community allowed more of a feeling of comfort instead of separation from my environment. The access to my teacher, the access to Yogi Bhajan was very important to me.
You always use this, so and so is dumb. This is a dumb condition. What do you mean by that? What is the purpose of communication? What is the purpose of talking? If people love me for my wisdom, wisdom is the way, and if they hate me for my foolishness, they have every right. But it's not a setup. I'm His Holiness, Sri Singh Sahib, Bhai Sahib, or Bhajan Singh Khalsa Yogi Ji. But I'm not His Holiness in the sense that my word is final, or my advice is final, or my opinion is final. Every opinion must have objection. Objection, opinion is meted out. And truthfully, I want these people to challenge things so that they can learn and become learned, and tomorrow you can face the world at their own. Because I am their yesterday, and they are my tomorrow.
What's very interesting about them, though, and what's very refreshing about them as a people, is that they don't have the Punjabi or the very Indian hang-ups that Sikhs, the wider Sikh community, actually has. So they bring quite a refreshing and crisp notion of what Sikh belief actually is. And I think we can learn quite a lot from that.
But while Sikhs may be finding inspiration in the West, the quality of leadership from their spiritual home of Amritsar in India has left many disappointed.
The leadership of the Sikh community in Amritsar has no direct responsibility or authority to tell Sikhs outside the country of how they should interpret their religion or how they should live their religion. And yet, because of the nature of Amritsar being the spiritual home for many Sikhs, for Sikhs generally, we do look there for guidance and advice. We don't get it, sadly.
We are really in an evolving phase right now, and a lot of the issues that we're facing are products of the fact that we are discovering for the first time that, you know, we have a community in the diaspora.
I do enjoy being a Sikh. I mean, I think the main advantage to being a Sikh is that I've got access to possibly the world's greatest teachings on life. What the things that the Guru's actually said, you'll find dotted around other religions and faiths, and it's really the best of all of those accumulated into one.
Sikhism has unfortunately been hidden away from the rest of the world and away from many Sikhs. But now that we come to the eve of the 21st century, I feel that here's a religion that's been waiting these 500 years to be discovered, because here's the guidance that it offers. It offers guidance not for the 16th or 15th century so much as guidance for the 21st century, for the problem of human rights, to further equality between human beings.
The Khalsa gave us a meaning, a beginning, and an identity. At the moment, we're still evolving and developing. And we, as young Sikhs, what we need to do is take and draw upon that message and actually put that into our personal life and make a difference.